What's up, people? Hotep Jesus, we back with another sharp conversation with Hotep Jesus. I'm your host, Hotep Jesus, also known as Brian Sharp, just my legal government slave name. You can get all my information at hotepjesus.com, which redirects to briansharp.co. I'm the author of 2 books, currently about to be 3 any day now. Author of Dominate Twitter. Make sure I go get a copy of that. It's my avant-garde work on marketing. Stellar work there. Also, author of The Unbreakable Rules of Masculinity. Some of you have made a big bag thanks to an app that I'm a co-founder in. Coinbits app. Coinbitsapp.com. Coinbits.app. If you're not in Bitcoin, there might be something wrong with you at this point. There's this chart of adoption. And in the beginning, are early adopters, and in the end, are laggards. If you wait any longer, you're technically going to be a laggard if you don't own any Bitcoin. So make sure y'all go to coinbitsapp.com, coinbits.app. It takes the think work out of buying Bitcoin. It buys the Bitcoin automatically for you. You get an email every week and it says, hey, we just bought X amount of Bitcoin for you. You can set the amount to whatever it is that you believe you can afford. $5, $10, $20, $50, $100, whatever that is. It'll just take it right out of your account every week and purchase Bitcoin and hold it for you. New feature coming soon. You'll be able to actually extract that Bitcoin and send it to a cold storage wallet or an address of your choice. Very excited about that new feature coming. A lot of people have been looking for that. Mr. Ashley, 999 super chat. Appreciate you. Let the music play. For some reason, your super chat disappeared when I went live, but thank you for the super chat. I appreciate you. People, stop grifting. Hit the super chats if you got questions for our turn tonight. At the very least, hit the like button. Likes are free. Let's go ahead and hit that button. Today, I have a very special guest for you. You may have recognized him from a previous conversation I had with this gentleman. Here's a popular YouTube channel called Legal Mindset. I introduce to you Andrew Esquire. Andrew, what's up, homie?
Hey, I'm glad to be here, Hotep. Glad to be here. And the timing is crazy because, when I planned to talk to you about this tonight, I did not think we were going to have a verdict. I thought we were just going to be talking about what was going to happen, not exactly what happened. So this is like a crazy, timely conversation.
Yeah, a lot of people think that, this is grifting. Like I planned this because the verdict and that. Now, we had planned this previously on this date that we planned to have this conversation about the trial. And it, like you said, it's just divine timing that they did the verdict today, the same day that we decided to do this conversation. Now, you've done a couple of videos on your channel covering the Derek Chauvin trial. Before we get into the verdict, would you like to go over some of those videos and some of the things that they entailed? Because I believe you called this.
Yes, I did predict this. Now, honestly, this went beyond my prediction, but I mean, my big prediction, which was there is so much pressure in this case. And I go through all the law in my videos. If you really want to understand the charges, which is huge for this case, because he was convicted guilty on all charges. You got to check out my video, Is It Murder? In that video, I break down all of the elements of the crimes he was eventually convicted for, 2 of which were murder, 1 of which was manslaughter, and exactly what those meant, exactly the types of crimes that are involved with those charges, and just the basics of what you have to understand about those charges, because they're not like we saw with OJ, with Casey Anthony, or with George Zimmerman. These were actually different charges, and they're much different than what we saw before. And actually, because of the way they were charged, it made it easier for the prosecution to come up with the W here where they failed in those other cases. So you've really got to check out my video if you want to see that explanation. My second video was on whether Judge Cahill made mistakes. Spoiler alert, he did make mistakes, but I'm not going to give it all away. If you want to check that out, look at that video. And that is still going to be relevant because this can be appealed. So all of those mistakes that I brought up in that video, which we'll talk about tonight, but they can be appealed. So those are all grounds for appeal when a judge makes a mistake in ruling one way or another within the case. So huge things there. But yes, I said that the effects that were going outside of the trial, and as a lawyer, I like to focus on the law, but I'm also not ignorant. I'm also not somebody who's looking at something in a vacuum, who's saying, you know what, we can just close off this courtroom and nothing else is happening outside of this courtroom, because that's just not the case. We live in 2021. I mean, there's so much social media, so much media, so much advertising, just all these pressures that are out, on normal jurors. And they influence the trial. They influence the judge. They influence the prosecutor. They influence the defense. And, we're going to get into that today. But I think that this is the most heavily influenced trial in history. I'll go out there on a limb and say that the outside influence on this trial decisively has been the greatest of any trial in history, because this is really the most modern case. There's no more modern murder trial than the Derek Chauvin trial. And not only that, but this trial has set a precedent for future cases and how they're going to go down.
I love that word, precedent.
Because you got to understand, there's legal precedent, and there's also just in terms of business, in terms of how things are done, in terms of how the media covers it, there's a precedent. And when they've established this precedent of here's what we're going to do, here's what we're going to come out and say in the media, here's the positions we're going to take, here's what congressmen are going to say. We'll get into Maxine Waters. I know we're going to get into Maxine Waters.
Yeah.
But, the fact that you have congressmen, getting out there and saying things on social media, that's something that didn't exist beforehand. And then, you can just get people amplifying that on social media to the point where there's no way that everybody in that courtroom hasn't heard it. And actually they demonstrated they did hear it. So, really crazy.
Yeah. You think the jury did hear that?
Come on. There's no way they didn't hear when a woman who is, I believe she was actually in Minneapolis when she said it, if we don't get a guilty verdict, that was what she said. If we don't get a guilty verdict for murder, making it clear that they don't want the guilty for manslaughter. No. If they don't get a guilty for murder, we should stay here on the streets and get more confrontational. That was the line that I heard, was more confrontational. And look, I don't know what more confrontational looks like, but I mean, if anything, that's a clear threat. And that was repeated by Judge Cahill and the defense attorney. They confirmed that they knew about it. So, I mean, if these guys know it and they've got no time, I mean, Nelson, the defense attorney, was saying all he does is this case, that's all he does, 24/7, but he's still got time to hear this. I mean, that's a lot. It's just breaking through all the barriers in this case and infecting everybody.
Yeah, that is the exact verbiage. She did call for people to get more confrontational. I actually want to play the video in a moment here once I get that pulled up. But first, can you just walk through the charges on what he was up for and exactly what those things meant?
Sure. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. Like I said, you want the deep dive version, go check out my video, Is It Murder? Right. But Cliff Notes, there were 3, right? So there was manslaughter. Let's start at the bottom. Manslaughter is the lowest threshold. Pretty much, you're just looking at pretty much negligence almost at that point. So is there criminal levels of negligence? It's more than just civil negligence. So let's say that somebody wasn't paying attention and they bumped you and you fell over and skinned your knee. They'd be liable for negligence. No, this is like severe negligence. That was the lowest level, easiest to convict. Now, the next level up from that was third-degree murder. Now, third-degree murder is a crazy charge because it's typically not used in this case. In fact, it initially was pulled off as a charge because it's so rare, it's so unused of a charge. So they pulled it off. But the appellate court ruled that they could put it back, the prosecution could put it back. The weird thing is that type of charge is really only used for stuff like Russian roulette or firing a gun randomly into a crowd, something where you hit somebody, but it's not really intended who, like if you're playing Russian roulette, somebody's going to die, but you don't know who it is. So it's sort of like an improbable death. So not really what we have here. We had 2 people that kind of knew who they were going to impact. It's not really the case. And the last one was second-degree unintentional murder. And that's important because there's two types of second-degree murder in Minnesota. There's intentional murder, which would, you'd have an intent. And then there's unintentional murder. But the unintentional murder, to be second degree, requires you to commit another crime. So that other crime would be assault, an unpermitted touching. So, for example, because he was on George Floyd and because it was unpermitted, that is the issue there. And there were two key problems that the prosecution had to overcome. And the reason why this is so shocking for everybody, especially anybody who knows anything about criminal defense, anybody who's ever seen these things overcome, where there were two huge hurdles which the prosecution had to overcome. First was the use of force, right? Because it is a defense if the use of force was authorized, which is why you saw the prosecution drag out pretty much an entire police department's worth of people as witnesses because they had to prove use of force. And we'll get into that. But that was one huge element, because if that had been there, it was authorized, all of it's out. The second one was causation. And that's, something that it sounds like a lawyer word, but what it really means is that did Derek Chauvin's actions cause the death of George Floyd? And here's the huge surprise, is that the jury said it did. Now, we're talking about factors that came out at court, which were as part of evidence, like there's the drug factor. There was the fact that he had damage to his heart, arterial damage to his heart, and a 90% blockage of one of his arteries. I mean, my dad actually, before he passed away, had a 90% blockage in one of his veins. It's extreme. That is, at that point, that's critical. I mean, anything can get you at any point. So, that is a very, very, very severe condition, and certainly a condition which nobody should be taking drugs. So you have to say, okay, it wasn't either one of those things. It was decisively Derek Chauvin's knee that did that in that very moment.
Right.
So that was the two hurdles they had to overcome, but the jury said they did.
Mm. Well, first of all, prayers up for Papa Andrew, Esquire. Gone but not forgotten. Mr. Ashley, 999. I read that one. Verdon Jordan, the second. 499 super chat. He said, thanks for all the info. You definitely motivate, fam. That's what's up, homie. Dubro, Guyman, $10 super chat. Said, no question, but big ups to you and Uncle Hotep. I catch the show every week. Shout out to the fam. Shout out to Uncle Hotep. I know he's in the chat getting his coon on. Yo, the likes ain't up. We got to get these likes up. The likes are free. Super chats mean you're not grifting, but these likes are free. You got to hit that like button. I'm going to go ahead and play this clip from Maxine Waters right now, and let's see exactly what she said, because I haven't seen this clip.
It's a good one.
Believe it or not. So let's go ahead and put this on the screen. Let's see what Mama Maxine got to say.
We're looking for a guilty verdict. We're looking for a guilty verdict, and we're looking to see if all of the talk that took place and has been taking place after they saw what happened to George Floyd, if nothing does not happen, then we know that we've got to not only stay in the street, but we've got to fight for justice. But I am very hopeful, and I hope that we're going to get a verdict that is say guilty, guilty, guilty. And if we don't, we cannot go away.
And not just manslaughter, right? I mean...
Oh, no, not manslaughter. No. This is guilty for murder. I don't know whether it's in the first degree, but as far as I'm concerned, it's first degree.
Congresswoman, what happens if we do not get what you just told? What should the people do? What should protesters on the street do?
I didn't hear you.
What happens?
What should protesters do?
Well, we got to stay on the street, and we've got to get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business.
Mama Maxine has spoken. He said, well, somebody asked her, what should the protesters do? That's what the protesters asked. They said, what should we do? And she said, we've got to stay in the street, get more confrontational. What does that mean legally for a congresswoman when she says stuff like that? And are there consequences, and how does that work?
That was a good question. And a lot of people have said, hey, that's something they could censure her on. Heck, they could expel her. I mean, that she actually gave more tangible evidence. I mean, this is a more direct call to violence than you even saw with Trump. I mean, they couldn't, if they had that smoking gun with Trump, they would have definitely gone for it in a much more clear way.
You're talking about the event that happened on the 6th.
Yes.
I said the insurrection.
The insurrection, yes.
Yeah.
By the way, they came up with the report on Officer Sicknick as part of that insurrection.
Yeah.
They just conclusively proved it was a stroke and not any action of the mob. Yeah.
Right. Wow.
So yeah, exactly. And they were touting that for a while. But like I said, if they had that, and the roles were reversed, the parties were reversed, certainly she'd be dead in the water. She'd be out. But that's clearly not going to happen politically, especially with the way the House and the Senate are controlled. That's not going to happen. But it is grounds for that, because I mean, once again, that is a call to direct violence. I mean, that is actually a call to direct violence. So they could take action on that. Now, granted, there's some First Amendment, and I'm a big proponent of free speech, so I take a generous line on that, and I try to be bipartisan about the freedom of speech. But the danger here is really eroding the right to a free and fair trial, an impartial trial. And also, because of these factors, because they played a factor in possibly how the jury came to a conclusion, that's a grounds for appeal, grounds for this being overturned. Because, if they can say, okay, there's undue influence, there's outside influence on this, that's grounds for it to be potentially overturned in the future. And, think about these jurors. A lot of times these jurors, what do they want? They want money. They're just regular Joes, right? This is their chance to write a book. George Floyd jury, jury of the century, modern trial of the century. They make a bunch of money. Let's say as part of their grift, they write that they were influenced by social media, or when they saw the video, they knew they were going to come in there and vote guilty. Boom. Yeah. Verdict is overturned. It's appealed, overturned. So there's a lot of potential. And I would say to the people that are pissed off about how it came out, who might not think it's fair, if anybody, is of that position, I'd say they gave a lot of grounds for appeal. And I guarantee you that they're giving them more grounds for appeal. It's almost in a way, Maxine Waters, she actually is helping Derek Chauvin through her ignorance of the law, through her ignorance of the appellate procedure. You know who else? Helped them? The city of Milwaukee. Sorry, the city, not Milwaukee, Minneapolis. I did that. I have a friend in Milwaukee. It always tells me Minneapolis. So Minneapolis, right? Minneapolis came to a settlement with the family of George Floyd during the trial, and this was a huge deal because the judge refused to go through voir dire, which is when they're interviewing the jurors. You have to do that if there's kind of major changes in circumstance to make sure it's a fair and unbiased trial, to make sure that they're not perceiving it the wrong way. So the fact that the city settled with the family looks like the city is admitting to guilt, looks like it's admitting that they did something wrong. And because they did that in the middle of the trial, if the jurors heard about that, it impacted them, another grounds for appeal, because they refused to re-question the jury. Honestly, the state wanted to get this done, and the judge wanted to get this done. A lot of the reason why there was not a mistrial declared, even though there was an ability at multiple points for a mistrial to be declared. And by the way, a mistrial is a do-over. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. But there wasn't a mistrial declared because they didn't want this to drag on, because the city didn't want to be threatened by protests, because they just want to move on from this. They're over this. And it's also clear when you look at the case, based on how much money they must have spent on all those professional witnesses. They got the best use of force witnesses in the book, and not of all which agreed with each other, but they got all the witnesses, they threw all the money. And by the way, all those lawyers, the lawyers that came up for the prosecution, most of those were private attorneys. They were not actual state attorneys. I mean, I have, in the past dealt with a lot of state attorneys. They're not paid a lot of money. So they got these private folks coming in here so they can say that their name was on the George Floyd trial and they were the prosecutor. That's why they had like 8 prosecutors, to like 1 defense attorney. I mean, they went all out to get him, and they spent a bunch of money. I mean, not just in the settlement, but just in dealing with this case.
When you say they spent a lot of money, you're talking about the state.
The state, yes, the state.
Yeah, what surprised me was the police force. The police was like, I don't know this nigga. I don't know who Derek Chauvin is. We ain't got nothing to do with this cat. Usually, when you see these cases, the police are usually backing him up. And I think that really hurt his case.
What do they call it? The blue bubble or the blue shield or something like that?
Yeah.
Like it's like something like that. Like when you're behind the blue wall, like the police protect each other like Code of Brothers. But that was out the door this time. I mean, like there was like nobody who is even plausibly giving him air cover on the use of force.
Yeah.
And honestly, let's be realistic. There's some extreme uses of force in America. I mean, I'm not a fan of extreme police use of force. I think it should be as tampered down as it can be, and they should try to do as minimal as they can, just in general, because I think that'll create better interactions. But the fact that there was no defense for him is massive, and he was removed from the system. I mean, essentially, this is what happens when the system turns on you. The system has, to this date, protected you, but at this point, it's turned against you. And why I say this is huge and this is precedential is because I think this is what is going to happen all across the U.S. whenever there's a case like this. I think if you're a police officer thinking about going in the police force right now, you have to seriously consider, do these people have my back? Is the state going to have my back? I mean, and honestly, I don't think they will. I think the precedent has been set that if there's, heavy social media coverage on something, you're out there, you're hanging in the wind. They are not going to go to bat for you. And that is a total paradigm shift in terms of the way they go, and I don't know whether I'm interested. Do you think whether that's a good thing, bad thing? I mean, we can speculate about it, but it's definitely a shift. We've never seen this before to this degree of officers just totally abandoning him and not coming out and speaking in favor.
Yeah, man. The mob is strong. Cameron Allen has a question for you. He said, do you find Maxine's threats on the jurors suspicious? As in how specific she was with her demands to the jurors, her repetitiveness, and how it was broadcast on TV. In my opinion, she was given a part to play. So that is, if she's saying the verdict, she's talking directly to the jury, right?
Yes. Yep, and she was specific too. She was talking about the number of years. She was talking about a murder charge. That's why the judge called it out. Judge Cahill said it. He said that statement by her specifically. He called her out. He did, because the Chauvin's lawyer, he brought out Nelson. He brought out, there's been a lot of general statements in the media, but called that one out specifically because it was so directed. And that's absolutely right. And that's exactly why she gave him those grounds for appeal, because that's jury intimidation almost. I mean, you're almost threatening them. And in fact, by the way, that might be criminal now in the state of Florida. If Maxine Waters had done that in the state of Florida, that might be criminal based on Florida's new anti-riot law, our combating public disorder law, which Governor DeSantis signed on Monday. I'm doing a video about that that's going to come out tomorrow. But mob intimidation, that's illegal here. That's decisively illegal. And what she did could be considered criminal mob intimidation, because she said, we're going to do this. We're going to stay out here. We're going to get confrontational if you don't give us this specific verdict. To me, that sounds like intimidation. I mean, she could be brought up on charges for that if she was in Florida.
My ADD kicked in. What exactly did Cahill say?
Cahill said that Maxine Waters' statements could be used to overturn the case, to overturn. He
specifically stated that.
He said that. He said that.
In front of the jury?
In front of everybody on national TV. And this is something that's been covered. I think Tim Pool did a little segment on it. And he went on to say that he wishes that politicians would stay out of it. And you could see he was ticked. He was clearly pissed.
Yeah.
Because he knew that this is something that really, really eroded the validity of the judicial system. And that's the issue, is that, it's these people wanting to override the system and use the mob to influence it, but they don't understand how that's backfiring, and it's going to backfire. Now, I'm not going to predict what's going to happen on appeal. There's a lot of political decisions and reasons why maybe the appellate court is scared too, because they're public officials and people can get their information. Maybe they're scared, to overturn this. Maybe they don't overturn this. But what I'm saying is that this has got huge grounds for appeal.
Ching 76 $5 super chat. Thank you. DG McBride 4.99 super chat. Thank you. He said the trial judge signaled he wants to, and how do you say that? Appellate court to reverse on appeal, referencing Maxine Waters' remarks, takes the heat off of him. So the judge is already saying it should go to appeal. Is that what he's saying? Yeah,
he's pretty much, the judge was heavily suggesting that this will be overturned on appeal. And he's kind of a clever guy. And by the way, this is something people forget. A lot of judges, including this judge, Peter Cahill, are elected. They are elected, right? They are not appointed. Some people think these are the wisest people. And to be fair to Judge Cahill, he has a long record. He's an accomplished judge from what I saw of his record. He's done this for a long time. He knows criminal law, right? He's done it for a long time. So
he's definitely competent.
I don't doubt that I'm not calling him incompetent.
Right.
I'm just saying that. But I think he knew what he was doing by setting it up for appeal. By setting it up for appeal, he's getting the jury off the hook. Then it's a bunch of old people that are on the hook, the appellate judges. And, do they have thick enough skin to take potential threats? When they're getting, death threats or whatever else they might get if they overturn the case, do they have that thick skin? I don't know, because certainly there's going to be a lot of pressure on them too.
So when it goes to the appellate court, there's no jury?
No. So appellate court is like the Supreme Court of the United States, right? It's structured very similarly. It's just judges. So at the trial level, you're dealing with the finder of facts. So that's the jury. You have a jury, and then you have the judge. The judge is like the referee, but the jury is really the one that's performing all of the substance. They're deciding what charges they're guilty of, what charges they're not guilty of. So the substance is on the jury, and they're looking at the facts, looking at the evidence, and that's part of our process, jury of your peers, to find out whether you did it or whether you didn't do it. And they're supposed to be the best people to find out the facts. Now, that's debatable in 2021. And I think, especially with social media, we can debate whether jury trials are really fair and impartial, because honestly, going forward, it seems like the judge might be even more impartial. And also, by the way, note that there's a sentencing hearing that they had to do. And a lot of times when you're convicted of murder, sentencing is a separate trial. It's like a separate mini trial. And Derek Chauvin chose to have sentencing done by the judge instead of by the jury. Why is that? He perceives the judge as being more fair. So the appellate court, just real quick though, the appellate court is when it's raised above the trial level. So after trial, it goes to the appellate court, which is the next level up. And they are just ruling on the law. They're looking at issues of law. So they're assuming all the facts are true. They're just saying, okay, based on the law, what do we have here? And so really you're looking at issues of law. So they're not going to overturn it because they say, oh, we think the facts are different. Like, for example, they're not going to say, the appellate court is not going to say, oh, well, we think the fentanyl contributed. They're going to say, no. Let's assume the jury is right and that Chauvin did this and the knee was, the thing that caused it. So they're saying, even assuming that, looking at under the law, did he have a fair trial? Because everyone's entitled to a fair trial. It's part of due process. And by the way, above the first level of appellate court is the Supreme Court. So if they don't like the decision at the appellate court level, the first level, they would go to the Supreme Court of the state, and the Minnesota Supreme Court would decide whether or not to overturn it. So they've got kind of two bites of the apple in order to potentially get off of this.
So this story ain't over.
No, not for long. And by the way, you've got 8 weeks before sentencing. So this is something that's been pushed down the line. And maybe that was strategic because it's going to get the protesters off the streets. Who knows?
Yeah. Big Viz 497 said, dark days ahead. Thanks to the Hoteps bringing some sanity. Appreciate what you do on the job, homie. Uncle Hotep 499 super chat. He said he is right about that. I think police enrollment will lower considerably. That's something I definitely want to give some thought to and play that through my mind a few times before I pontificate on that. I'll probably have a good take on Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern time, right here for Hotep's Been Told You. Sayorsi I can't read. I'm Uncle Hotep tonight. What if all the cops in the state stayed home sick tomorrow? People would feel what no cops is like. Plus gun sales would double. Bad, right? Man. Joe Shepard, $5 super chat. I don't know if there's a message. Let me just expand my screen really fast here. No, there's no message attached. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate you. Joe is not grifting. Be like Joe. Drop some super chats and at the very least, likes are free. Hit the like button. So you said this thing is far from over. It can definitely go to appeal. That's wild. Now you did say the judge made some mistakes.
He made some mistakes.
What mistakes?
I could go through a lot of them. So, for example, I said a big one. For example, he forgot to re-voir dire, which is re-question the jury. Anytime anything big happens, you got to re-question the jury. That's why they have alternates. That's why they have people sitting on the side that they keep ready to substitute in. So if there's a conflict with one of the jurors, they say, oh, you know what? I did see the settlement and that did influence me. And I did think that kind of implies that he's guilty. Well, they can remove that juror. So you really have to be able to do that. But because the judge really, honestly, it felt like he just wanted to get this bad boy done. He just wanted to finish it. He just wanted to get it off his case. I mean, it feels like he rushed through some of that. There was no sequestering. So sequestering is when you take the jury and you force them to stay at a designated location, not driving home, not seeing barricades being put up, not seeing people, protesting other shootings, the Brooklyn Center shooting. Obviously that had an influence to some extent, despite the judge saying it didn't. In the OJ trial, they were sequestered for over 280 days. This was a much shorter trial, wouldn't have required as much sequestering, and just put him in a safe location and have him sit there and think about the trial instead of being affected by all of this media that was undoubtedly getting to them. And even the judge acquiesced that, hey, there's no way to stop all the media. And that's probably true, but you have to factor in that effect.
Yeah, I definitely think the jury should have been sequestered.
Oh, there's another one too. The other big one was one at the end. So Dr. Tobin, who was one of the prosecution's witnesses, he had a last minute blood test he ran. He ran a blood test at the last minute during the trial. And he wasn't supposed to come back and try and testify again during the prosecution's rebuttal, but they allowed it. And really, honestly, you're not supposed to ambush the defense. You're not supposed to essentially, last minute surprise witness. I know that happens on TV, that happens in movies, the bombshell, witness that comes into the last second. That's actually fake. That's completely fake. And that's actually like very, 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 it's so bad. It's so negative to the defense that alone is often grounds for overturning a decision. Just the fact that you ambush the defense because they have no time to prepare. If literally, and this was the case, they gave him notice the night before they wanted to come back and present this evidence. That's not okay. You can't do that. You can't give another attorney the information and say, hey, he's coming back the night before. That's not enough time to prepare. I mean, these attorneys take weeks, months to prepare. So trying to do that was really unfair to the defense and huge ground for appeal.
Right. Hold on. So we had some super chats here come from Kamal Kokai Taylor. Said, what do you think of Nancy Pelosi thanking George Floyd for sacrificing his life for justice? Did you hear that?
I did not hear that. I did not hear that. When did she say that? Was that like recently?
It was right after the verdict. She was giving her grift speech and she said, George Floyd gave his life for justice. And I'm just like, what? That's not what happened, lady.
Yeah. I mean, if you watch the video, that's clearly not what happened. Man, that is pain.
Kat Garcia, in my opinion, the cops don't care about Chauvin. They're just glad it's not them, but it will be them soon with this precedent. Pandora's box has popped open.
Yeah, I'm interested to see when you opine on that and definitely think on that because that's what I'm thinking. When I say this has changed precedent, I think that is the biggest precedent that police officers, it is a paradigm shift, especially in blue states, blue cities that are saying that have talked about defunding the police, that have kind of, adopted the BLM mantra, that grift. That is that is going to change how departments operate, and it's going to change how the law functions, because you're having all these presumptions put against cops. You got to understand, when they were looking at the use of force policy, and the defense did a good job of bringing it up, these use of force policies are intentionally written to be vague, to give them latitude to do pretty much anything they do, because they get hit with excessive force complaints all the time. Pretty much any time they put their hands on anybody, they're getting hit with an excessive force complaint. So they're trying to make them broad to get officers off. But if they're going to come back and look at them and rewrite them to be stricter on cops, they're opening themselves up to the very prosecution that they're trying to prevent, they're trying to stop. They might make it easier to prosecute. From a legal standpoint, this might make it easier to prosecute officers. As departments restrict their cops, they're going to open them up. They're going to make them vulnerable, because they're going to do something that's going to cross that line. And boom, excessive force. Boom, the cops are convicted of crimes. Boom, they're getting convicted of assault and battery, because that's no longer an authorized use of force. Now your cops are in jail. Well, what are you doing? I mean, are you getting scabs? Are you, I mean, there's a lot of potential issues with this. We call it a slippery slope, and that could be thinking down the line 5 years, 10 years. But, when you start a wave, you got to understand that wave is going to have effects.
So my mind is working on this police thing. And it's going in two directions right now.
All right.
I'm going to start with the lighter one first. So what we have here is a divorce of the police in the state. Men police, human police, the state, okay? Which might say, okay, your police presence is light. How about we send National Guard in? Okay, let's take it even a step further. How about we bring international police onto your grounds, including NATO, including UN. These are precedents I think that could happen simply by declaring a state of emergency. And it doesn't take much for them to declare a state of emergency.
Well, just like we talked about the other time we were talking, about the state of emergencies. We're still in a state of emergency. All these jurisdictions are still in a state of emergency, mostly because of COVID, because allegedly you still need it because of the Rona, you still need a state of emergency. So all these places are still under a state of emergency as of today. And where is the emergency that is different than a week ago, than a month ago, than 6 months ago? And once you give them these powers, they don't rescind them. That's how countries, Egypt, France, a lot of these countries have been under states of emergency for years. They've been operating for years, sometimes decades. They operate under emergency powers.
Yeah. And then the second place my mind is going, we don't have human cops. We can replace them with RoboCop. We just saw in New York, they pulled out the Robo Dog. And I think that's a place where we're going to get to, where police say, hey, look, it's too much risk to have men because of liabilities and biases and racism and all this stuff. So we're going to have these robots do the policing. And I can tell you right now, the people are going to wish. They're going to wish that they had human police officers, because that robot is going to be on your ass. The robot's going to take your pulse and apply just enough pressure to keep your ass down and alive at the same time.
Yep. It's going to administer the perfect amount of force to immobilize you without killing you. Yep.
Going to be an excruciating pain.
And it's not gonna care how loud you're yelling,
Nope.
how loud you're screaming. It's gonna give zero because it doesn't have empathy. It's an algorithm, and it's performing like the algorithm's performing.
Yeah. And the other thing is we're going to have a huge invasion of privacy, because these things are going to come with AI cameras, and they're going to be surveilling and taking data all day long. So data is going to be mined, possibly sold. Who knows? Go ahead.
And well, I will say privacy is a huge issue, and we're actually seeing this year all across the U.S. There's a lot of privacy legislation coming. That's actually the big wave this year is privacy because people are concerned about privacy. The problem is that the law is so behind tech and it's so behind where we are practically that it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be years before we figure out what we're doing with data and who can collect it, how it's disseminated, and the fact is that a lot of people feel comfortable with the government having a lot of this data. Nowadays, for example, when we're talking about the vaccines and the vaccine passport and a lot of these issues, if they're comfortable with that, then they're comfortable with criminal data. They're comfortable with other sorts of data that might implicate your character, that might allow a algorithm to predict whether you're going to commit a crime in the future. We're talking like Minority Report style here, right? You might have a drone following you because you're a highly probable suspect. Imagine that.
Yeah.
So totally logistically possible in the future, especially with future technology. Definitely possible. But it's a crazy transformation of this country and what we thought was permissible and not permissible.
So real. Where are we? Susanna Owl, $5 super chat, thank you. Joy Williams, $5 super chat, thank you. The Og OG, $5 said, let's call it what it is. A grift. Chelsea Swag, shout out to the Hoteps. What precedent does this set for future legal cases involving active duty cop related homicides? Let me read it again because I just want to let it digest myself. What precedent does this set for future legal cases involving active duty cop related homicides? That's a good question.
This will be used as precedent for future cases without a doubt, because the prosecution, for any prosecutor, if this sticks, if this is not challenged on appeal, if this is not overturned by a Supreme Court, because let me be clear, if it is appealed and overturned, if the Minnesota Supreme Court rules on this and says, hey, we got to throw this out, then it's bad law. From a legal standpoint, it's bad law. But if it's upheld, if this sticks, the precedent will be massive because the prosecution can point to this case and say, hey, if Maxine Waters making this statement didn't influence the jury, I don't know what's going to. It's going to take somebody literally holding a juror hostage physically for them to count as intimidation. Frankly, the social media is going to be able to just go wild on this. Media is going to be able to go wild on this. No amount of pressure is going to be too much, it seems, from a precedential standpoint, because it wasn't, if it's not overturned. If it is, then all that's out the window. Then it's bad law. Then all what happened at the trial level is garbage. So we are going to have to wait and see from a legal standpoint what this is going to be in terms of precedent. But from a practical standpoint, which I think is what we've been talking about, it's just reality. I think from a reality standpoint for active duty officers, we're seeing the playbook. The playbook used to be administrative leave. We do an internal investigation. Our internal investigation says nothing wrong happened. That person is left on leave for a while. There's, maybe a trial. They're not guilty. It goes back, they're back in the system after a while. Maybe they leave that jurisdiction and they go work somewhere else just because it's too hot for them. So they move to a different city, but they're still in the system, hands are clean. Now we're seeing this is what's going to happen. If social media is on you, they're going to fire you and they're going to completely throw you under the bus to save themselves and to save the department. So the police department is going to save themselves. The politicians are going to save themselves, throw you under the bus. Also, the other thing is there's the payout. There was a huge, that payout, that settlement to Floyd's family, massive, unprecedented in size. I've never seen a settlement that big ever, and to think that, okay, other people, okay, maybe their case isn't as good as George Floyd's family, but they're going to go for it because they see that as a precedent. So now they're going to challenge it. There's going to be an increase in excessive force cases. There's going to be an increase in challenges. Not just when it's a homicide, but even for lesser condition.
What I see is open season on white folks, right? Because if George Floyd is white, this ain't news, which means that an officer can apply as much pressure to a Caucasian as he wants, even kill him, and he'll probably be backed by the state. But if you kill a black man or a black woman, that might be your ass. So I think there's going to be a very huge imbalance. And some people might be taking it out on white folks. Man, this is wild. Where we at? Okay. Big Viz said Maxine demanded Chauvin be determined guilty of first degree. Since he wasn't charged with first, could that be why be a way that she covers her tracks?
No, that's just ignorance. You know, I mean, she's just ignorant. I mean, a lot of people, I mean, look, I figured people were ignorant in this case when I would listen to them and they'd be talking about intent. You know, like, oh, he intended to murder him. I'm like, guys, that's not even an element. Like, you're not even paying attention. So, you know, if you're not paying attention to that level, you're just going with what the social media, what somebody's telling you. I mean, what you saw from the video, the original 9-minute, 29-second video, you're going off that. You're not going off the case facts. You're not looking at anything else. And let me tell you, having, you know, I didn't listen to every single witness because, you know, when you get to like the 9th use of force witness, you know exactly what they're going to say, you know, but looking at all the facts is very, very important. And seeing that video from the trial, I encourage anybody who hasn't seen it, go back and look at the video of George Floyd when he's fighting and resisting and getting into the car. That's wildly different than a person who's laying there not moving, you know? And when you understand that one was immediately preceding the other, that it transitioned quickly from one to the other, it's not like one is, you know, an hour in the future. It's just like literally 16 minutes. And, you know, the half of that essentially, you know, was fighting, struggling before there was the famous video. So I think that's really important. And that's what people need to, you know, go back and consider and just look at it, you know, look at some of these facts yourself. And by the way, these are all public record, guys. So just go out there, look at it. You know, it's going to be out there for a while. You can pull that footage.
For everybody just now tuning in, I'm talking to Legal Mindset on YouTube. Andrew is his name, but make sure you subscribe to Legal Mindset once this stream is over. And make sure you follow him on Twitter. Also Legal Mindset. Mark S. He said the brass already ordered them to stay away from blacks before this. All this will be astronomically destructive to the black community that already is experiencing record violence. Won't argue that. Def Jules always go full Hotep. Catches KM. He said the state wins. They got their scapegoat and take no heat. Lemmings don't get it. Yo, HJ, Stabby, gave my father, Fauci Juice gave my father Bell's palsy, no cap. Yeah, I saw that DM, man. That's wild, Joe. That's wild, man. I send love to you and the fam, bro. But I was saying the same thing. I felt like the state was throwing them under the bus just to absolve themselves of guilt.
How do you feel about that? Like, because I've seen a lot of people take that point, and I've seen some people, even people that I respect their opinions, saying, hey, you know, this is like one for the good of everybody. You know, I mean, what do you think about that way of thinking? Well, like, how do you think about that train of thought? Because I know you think deeply about these things. So, you know, I want to get like your opinion on what you think, you know, for the greater good. You know, one takes the hit, but it saves the whole city, right? You know?
It's dicey. I haven't had a chance to really assess that thought, but my initial, when we got the verdict, I was like, oh, thank God. You know, like, at least, you know, we don't got to worry about, you know, I don't think America could have withstood a guilty verdict.
You mean a not guilty verdict?
I'm sorry, a not guilty verdict.
Yeah.
I don't think we had it in us.
I mean, and I just wonder, would it have been worse than last year or not? Like, that's why I put a poll up for my. It would have
been 10 times as worse.
Okay. Last year was pretty bad.
Last year was bad, but it wasn't as bad as the LA riots.
That's
wasn't
true.
as bad as the Newark riots. I mean, you can't really say as bad, right? Because the Newark riots is doing the same thing. It was burning shit down, and the LA riots is burning shit down. So I mean, it might be on level playing ground. You know, I don't know how we measure these things, right?
property damage, deaths. I don't know. I
Right,
mean, you know,
right. Like, yeah, how would you, measure that?
and I
But
guess number of cities, right? Because like, this is something that happened. It was different because it happened in
yes,
multiple cities, not just one city. Like LA,
right,
remember back in the day with like Rodney King and everything. That was like in LA. Like it was
right,
like not as big here in Florida, but like now you're having stuff everywhere. That's the scary thing.
right. And I think that's what would make it bigger is the fact that it wouldn't just be in Minnesota. It'd be New York. It'd be here. It'd be there. And it's just like my dad called me. He like, yo, you got your ammo ready? I'm like, yeah, my shit on deck. Cause he's like, yo, if they drop that verdict, I know what it's gonna get like out here, and we gotta protect ourselves. So, if I got that call from my dad, that there could be, violence against people, and we have to protect ourselves, I definitely, if he understood that, we gotta understand that. But I think that's dangerous because then it just means a mob could just influence every single case, and so therefore we don't have fair trials anymore.
They're out. If that's the case, fair trials are out. Now,
Yeah,
it may have turned out different if this was in a different jurisdiction that took a harder line on protecting the sanctity of the trial, right? So, for example, if this went down in Florida based on all the laws we just passed and everything else, I mean, I think they may have thought of it differently because they may have said, okay, well, we're not, that's something that's not going to happen here because it's now anything involving intimidation has been criminalized, right?
yeah,
Including things like doxing. Florida just made pretty much doxing illegal.
yeah.
So, I mean, you've got a lot of protection. So maybe it would come out different if it was in a different state. But yeah, no, I definitely, it wouldn't have been pretty.
I just, I always try to look at both sides, right? So
Yeah.
I'm going to flip everything on its head and say, what if the Democrats decide to revisit their days of being Dixiecrats? And now they get to make black men the enemy, just like we were in the 80s and 90s, just like we were prior to that. And now we're on trial and they control the media and they control the mob. That precedent has already been set where they could just lock a black man up for something he didn't do because their mob has influenced it. You never know how powers can flip because the powers that be control the balance of power. Your laptop went out. Throw an ice pack underneath the bottom of it. But I'm always like leery of that stuff, man. You never know when because the Democrats are obviously super racist. For example, with the voting laws in Atlanta and the MLB said, we're not going to do it here. We're going to do it in Colorado. And it's like, you just took all the fucking small business revenue and sent it to a predominantly white area. Like, what is that, right? So they're obviously underhandedly racist. So I'm never in full alignment or wanna, even if I like sometimes the things that they do, I'm always like, because if they flip, this could come back on me.
And that's what I always say. When you're talking about the law, when you're talking about legal precedent, you're talking about something that can flip,
Yeah.
So if you want to set a precedent, if you're going to set a precedent, you got to understand the implications. Like people talk about the Senate filibuster, right? You talk about the filibuster in the Senate. And the reason why it hasn't been gotten rid of is because politicians understand that one year they're in power, the next year they're not. So they get rid of it, it ain't coming back. Nobody's bringing it back. The same thing for court packing. It's something that people have understood, as soon as one president packs the court, and by the way, packing the court means adding more justices to the Supreme Court. So right now it's conservative control, but if Biden were to say, I'm going to add 4 justices, to the Supreme Court, that would pack it, that would swing it in a liberal direction. Well, guess what? There's a conservative president, conservative Congress, it'll be packed again. So then you have just a continual piling on of the issue. So, you have to understand that the tides can change, and, people get high on the hog and really get out of control when they're in power. Things flip, shoes on the other foot, and it is not fun.
Yeah, yeah. I always like to look at both sides, and I'm just like, man, I don't trust these Dixiecrats. Okay. DJ Mac, what up, homie? He said, love this. Thank you, AJ, for introducing me to Legal Mindset. He's got a great channel, too. Yeah. His channel's growing super fast. Last week, Scott Adams shared his video, and that thing went viral. So make sure y'all give him a follow. Shout out to Halima, Sketch, and the mods in the chat. Trish, appreciate y'all. Holly Movie Star said, just seen that a 15-year-old black girl has been killed by police in Columbus, Ohio. Happened around the time of the Chauvin verdict. Oh, Lord, here we go again. This stuff is this is gonna go around the clock in rotation, man. Opinionated junkie, people in NY chanting quit your job to cops. That's dangerous. That's dangerous. That's dangerous. You're gonna get them robo-cops. You're not gonna like them. See, when you got a human cop, you know, they outrunning a human cop.
Mm-hmm.
That robo dog, oh, he gonna hit you with the Mortal Kombat. Get over here. That's cool.
And they're going to go anywhere they can go. You know, imagine, because see, the thing is, here's the thing. Cops are allowed to look in public view, right? So here's a big thing. No one knows. So plain view, right? So they can look in plain view. Well, an officer is limited two-dimensionally. They're limited to the ground and what they can walk up to. There might.
Oh, you cut out. Where we at?
Oh, there you go. You got me?
Yeah, I got you.
What I was saying.
Oh, you cut out again. Mr. Relax 79 said, would be a globalist wet dream to be able to bring in international policing community onto U.S. shores would destroy any vestige of our Constitution. Indeed. Go ahead, yo.
So what I was saying is a police officer is limited to a two-dimensional plane. They can only walk up to something. They can, go up to what they can see in the window, let's say in your car. But a drone could legally go circle around your building to the back and from public airspace view right through your window and see what you're doing in your backyard. Right here, I'm in an apartment in a 24th floor. Right now, nobody's looking through my window. But guess what? A drone could legally do that. And they see one thing, one reason. And you got to understand, they're scanning through a database. They can just need to find one crime you're committing. Boom. They got a reason to come and investigate. And, as crimes populate, and there's more things that are potential crimes, that's going to become easier and easier and easier. That reality with drones and robots is not a fun one.
Yeah. And they're going to have thermal vision and all of that. And, cops miss. Them robots not going to miss. When they fire that weapon, they not going to miss.
And we've already got precedent from this from canines, like canine units outside of a car. Canines are allowed to sniff, right? Right now, a lot of times it doesn't happen because they have to wait too long. Courts have said, hey, you can't keep them there longer than you normally have at a regular traffic stop. But guess what? What if every officer has a robot in their trunk and they let it out, it does a full scan and finds you got some of that flour in the back seat? Well, there you go. They got you because that robot was able to find it, and it's going to find it with 100% accuracy, unlike the dog, which is hit or miss.
Remind me, I want to go over traffic stops with you before we leave.
That's crazy. Traffic stops is I could do a whole episode on traffic stops.
You're going to have to. Hotep Grim, $10. Thank you. He said Hotep and Bill. Cameron Airlin, $10. Thank you. He said, I believe people are as moral as their self-interest. Whoa. It's a bomb right there. People are as moral as their self-interest. That's a bombshell right there. He said, do you think cops will now play Pontius Pilate and wash their hands of situations? How this affects the gun debate too?
I mean, right now you gotta understand, because I think we talked a little bit about this, but you got huge gun legislation in Congress right now. Huge. Yes. So you're talking about a time in which police are going to be less likely to respond or more, hesitant because they're trying to be careful. They're trying to watch themselves. And you're at the same time restricting guns. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. You know, there's a recipe for a lot of potential crime to uptick when you have cops that are saying, I'm not sure I want to respond to that. And, other people saying, okay, well, we're going to take away all their guns, or, require them to have such licensing, such registration that you're effectively taking them away.
Right. Damn. Countess of Monte Cristo, he that would make his own liberty secure must guard even his enemy from oppression. Yeah. For if he violates this duty, he establishes a precedent that will reach to himself. Thomas Paine. Great quote. I agree, man. That's why I say people like, yeah, this white man, da da da. I'm like, I wouldn't celebrate too much because your day could come. And these Dixiecrats will flip on your ass as soon as it's in their interest, because they're replacing you already. We know with the Asiatics and the people below the border. So black folks, you the man right now. But as soon as the Dixiecrats no longer need your vote, they could flip on you and make you public enemy number one once again. Do not get it confused.
Yep, demographics have shifted. We've seen that in the law tons of times, where at certain points in the law, certain people have been favored, certain groups have been favored. Things shift, boom.
It changes everything. Bullet Tooth Tony, he said, think the court packing. No amendment is safe. Speech is violence. Crowd. Open the door for Machiavellian partisan backlash as a pendulum swings. He's basically saying that, he's saying court packing, no amendment is safe. Speech is violence. Crowd, right? That crowd. Open the door for Machiavellian partisan backlash as the pendulum swings. You agree with that?
I mean, that I feel like that goes along with what you've been saying, right?
Yeah.
So that crowd that's saying that, we don't give a hoot about the Constitution. Like, I mean, I think that's a thing right now. Literally, when I talk about the Constitution, people all go, oh, that's a conservative point. Like the Constitution suddenly has become conservative, and freedom of speech suddenly has become conservative. My entire life, that was a liberal issue. Freedom of speech was a liberal issue. Now it is a conservative issue. My mind is so blown by this, like from a legal standpoint, because it should be an issue for everybody. I think everybody should be concerned about freedom of speech, freedom of the press, constitutional rights. Everybody should be concerned about that, regardless of political party. But you're exactly right. When the winds change, they're screwed. I mean, the people that are implementing this don't understand the precedent. And like you said, politics change, demographics change. When they do, they've dug their own grave. And the other thing is, when there's partisan infighting within parties, they're in big trouble. I mean, they're in big trouble when one side is going against another internally. Lots of issues there.
Joy Williams, AI is already a done deal, out of control. When are we going to unite and get out of this mess? That's a good question, Joy. Dr. Bees and Guns, $4.99, said, yeah, this drive to end police is going to come back and bite people. Non-American and robot police, and we can't defend ourselves. Great. Oh, my God. Any opinions on how the defense did in the case of the Chauvin trial?
So I will say one thing. Overall, if I'm talking overall, they did a pretty good job. He was a good attorney. I mean, I'm not going to say he was incompetent. He definitely was not incompetent. Okay. Did he make some tactical errors? Yes. It's a long trial. He had a lot to consider. He was dealing with a ton of information the prosecution threw at him. I don't hold those against him. Some things, for example, his witnesses that he chose to call for use of force didn't handle those the best. And yes, that's something that was very important for them to handle. And by the way, you got to also consider that the defense attorney making a mistake can also be grounds for Chauvin to get off, because ineffective assistance of counsel, you got to understand, this is a huge charge. When you're dealing with criminal charges, ineffective assistance of counsel is a way to get out of jail for free. So a lot of people, let's say you get a public defender, let's say they spent 5 minutes on your case, they really didn't know what they were talking about, they're totally incompetent. You were convicted, you can file for ineffective assistance of counsel saying they were incompetent, they didn't handle it right. So if he did make a good mistake, and there is grounds for that. I mean, he could say, okay, well, these tactical errors are ineffective assistance of counsel. He could get out of jail as well. So he does have multiple outs. Our system is set up with the presumption of innocence at its core. I know that's something that he talked about during his closing argument, talked about burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Once again, that's a very low standard. It's supposed to be a presumption of innocence as well, presumed innocent until guilty. I think culture has totally flipped that on its head. It is now presumed guilty until shown innocent. And that is the real seismic change with this case. Is it started with a person who was presumed guilty by everybody. I mean, I can even say for myself, looking at the evidence, I was saying, okay, well, they're really gonna, the defense, I caught myself thinking this, the defense is really going to have to show up and turn up for this to be overturned. And I was thinking, if I'm thinking this and I'm an attorney, I'm trying to be rational, there's no way a juror is not, saying, okay, there's a burden on the defense. You can explain it academically, but I think you feel the pressure, you feel that mob influence on you to think a certain way, to think that it's his duty to prove himself innocent. It's not. A lot of people, for example, assume that only the guilty remain silent because Chauvin did not testify.
Right.
But that's smart. That's your Fifth Amendment right. And most people don't testify when they're charged because they can cross-examine you and they can ask you anything and you have to answer. And you often end up digging your own grave by testifying. But people can say, oh, he looks guilty. Look at him. He's not even testifying. I saw that in my comments, people saying, oh, Chauvin didn't even testify. Look at that. Well, they don't understand the law. They don't understand the presumptions. They don't understand the procedure. But, that's the way it is now.
So that's usually normal for them not to take the stand.
Usually normal for them not to testify, unless there's a very, very good reason. But even then, almost all attorneys will say, don't do it. But it is your right, if you want to testify. So, if you want to get up there and testify, even if your lawyer says don't do it, you can get up there and do it. And some people are convinced, that if they get up there and talk, they're going to be able to convince the jury. They often just end up digging themselves a grave.
Yeah, because then the prosecution asks you questions, you start getting up there stumbling and mumbling, and now you look crazy.
And they're asking you yes and no questions, so you have to answer yes or no. So, you can't go yes, but, and they can just cut you off and keep going.
Right.
So you're required to answer a yes, no, and they can frame it a yes, no to just dig you in. I mean, just to bury you and make you look like a scumbag.
Yeah. Opinions on the prosecution? I know you said they had like 9 prosecutors.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. I mean, when you've got 7, 9, 8 prosecutors, tag teaming in, I mean, it's like a wrestling match, you're like tag teaming and, dropping the elbow, hitting them with the table. I mean, it's hard for them not to do well. And like I said, I think only one of them worked for the state. It was one of the female attorneys. But generally they did a good job, but they did a good job because they were playing on people's emotions. They did everything emotional to trigger these people. I mean, just the way they, even talking about, oh, George Floyd's mother, her name was Sissy, this and that, just playing into every single emotional element. I mean, that closing argument, they hammered home that 9-minute and 29-second video for a reason, because there was such a reaction, such a cultural shift to that. That was such a big thing. So I think they did what they had to do. Did they mess up? Yes. Were they super aggressive? Yes. For example, they did a lot of things that were objected to by Nelson, by the defense attorney, which could have caused a mistrial, could have thrown the whole thing out there. But they wanted to be ballsy. They wanted to go for it, and they did it. And they got away with it, frankly.
Terrence Scott said, keep your eyes on Columbus, Ohio. Yeah, I just went and did a Twitter search on Ohio, and here we go again. And people, you have to understand something, that there's a lot of crimes that happen every single day. Thousands of crimes are committed, and the media is going to cherry pick the ones that are most lucrative and the ones that push the agenda. So they can make it seem like there's a run on black people right now, or they can make it seem like, flies are the worst thing that ever happened, right? Mm-hmm. Also, we know that the story broke today with the stabbies causing some people had to go get brain surgery, the old J&J stabby thing. So just keep your eyes wide. Let's see. Okay, I read that one. The charges, the three charges. Three charges were he was found guilty of.
Yes.
All three.
Yes.
People were saying they could understand manslaughter, but not murder. Many people were saying, I can't understand how he could be guilty of all three because that just doesn't make sense, right? So what do you make of the fact that he was guilty on all three charges?
Well, they're allowed to convict him on all counts. And sort of, you got to think of it like a hierarchy. Like if someone is guilty of, let's say, second degree murder, then there's now we'll say, because of the way these work, it's kind of weird. They could have found him not guilty of third degree murder because it's sort of different, like legally. So that one is a little odd to me, that charge. But what I'm saying is, if you're convicted of murder, you're also guilty of manslaughter, because that is a lesser crime. If you have to commit manslaughter in order to get to murder, right? So the amount of mens rea, which is the amount of thought, which is just a negligence, a criminal negligence, you had beyond criminal negligence in order to have second degree murder, right? So that was required to get there. It's like a step up. So he's convicted of them. Now, he won't be sentenced for all of them. The sentencing will, take into consideration that he has no criminal history. Now, the prosecution will try to make it worse. There's going to be a hearing because they're going to push for the max. Which is why it takes 8 weeks to sentence, because both sides have to submit a memo. The prosecution is going to say, give him the max. Defense is going to say he has no criminal history. So he's not going to be sentenced for all of them, but he'll be sentenced for some portion of those crimes. Probably at a minimum, the statutory guidelines for second degree murder, which is the highest one he got convicted of, is 12.5 years for someone with no criminal history. Yes, he could get up to 75. Don't think that's likely. I think he's getting less than that. Now, I will say, I think Maxine Waters threatened if he got under 15. So I think what they're trying to say is, we don't want you to give him the standard. We want to give him above the standard. You've got to actually punish this guy. So once again, I don't know what effect that's going to have either. I mean, now you're talking about the judge who's deciding, not the jury. So we'll see how the judge rules on that. There could be protests just for sentencing in 8 weeks. And, it depends on how ready these protesters are and what the triggers are. If they're going to look for any excuse to protest, I mean, that would be a great reason to protest if he got 12.5 instead of 15. Right.
So what's the problem between the third degree and second degree?
Well, the thing with third degree, like I was trying to explain, is earlier, is that third degree is supposed to be like a random act that you're doing with a depraved mind, right? So like, once again, I firing into a crowd. So, if you fire a firearm into a crowd, it's probably going to hit somebody. That's like a depraved act, because somebody's going to be hit and injured. It kind of requires a different state of mind than intentionally committing a felony, i.e. assault, which led to death, right? So your state of mind is, I'm intentionally doing this, and it's leading to death, rather than I'm randomly doing this act. So the fact that they convicted him on both shows they wanted to give him the max. They're like, this is just horrible, so horrible. We're going to throw everything at him. So, and I had predicted that they would definitely get him on the third degree count, because that was in the middle. So at least they're going to get him on that, because then they got a murder charge, but it's not the highest. Right. But they got him on everything, including the highest they could get him on.
Yeah. So legally, it just doesn't make sense to convict him from the third and the second.
No, it's just a weird thing. It kind of it's more of a statement about the jury than anything else. It shows that they were just wanting to be perceived as giving him the max sentence.
Yeah, which might lead to the whole theory about outside pressure.
Yes.
Is there a legal term for that when there's outside pressure on the jury?
Well, there's a lot of terms, but one you hear a lot is jury nullification. So that's essentially and a lot of times you hear that in terms of a juror saying, I'm going to sit on they'll lie or hide information during voir dire when they're questioned initially. And they'll say, I'm going to sit on this jury just to ruin the verdict, So you get that. And if you see the bias coming out, that's grounds for overturning it. And if they start getting interviewed, or they start doing statements, or let's say they said during trial that they don't support BLM, and they come out and they're got their BLM shirt and they're like, I was inside the entire time, that could ruin it.
Mary O'Donnell, what up, Mary? He said, I'm no legalese, but a nurse and mother of an addict. Seasoned cop doesn't know what a panic attack looks like or when someone's high. He could have handled completely different over a bogus $20. I don't care about Chauvin. You know what, Mary? I'm not even going to argue with you. And that was the other thing with me was, you know, me, I'm like, fuck the state, right? And everybody that claims them. So I was like, yo, if Chauvin got to go down, you know, for the benefit of the rest of it, that motherfucker got to go. Because I'm definitely not choosing him over, you know, another citizen in the life. And I do think he could have handled that traffic stop better. I think most of these traffic stops could have been handled better with all of these guys, you know. Sean Garner, you know, they got him for selling cigarettes, and I'm just like, what? Like,
yeah, and I try to tell people, you know, you don't confuse the legal opinion on this, because there's, you know, the legal analysis with an opinion that what was done was morally right, because that's totally different. That's a whole separate thing, right?
Right.
You know, was this handled correctly? No, clearly. I want to make it very clear, and I say this on my channel too, I'm not a fan of police interactions that are brutal, that are like this. I'm not a fan of the state in general, you know, and I have a whole video, check it on my channel, police and why not to trust them. That's literally one of my other big fucking videos, because, you know, you've got a lot of issues when you're stopped by the cops and they're just looking for crimes because that's their job, you know. And I think there's a fundamental issue with this mentality of being put on the street to find crimes.
Yeah.
You know, that's a specific mentality, which maybe it's not the best for society, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe there needs to be another role in there that, you know, you're doing some public good and, you know, that's just one of your functions.
Right.
You know, I don't know. I mean, that's a broader conversation.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's not a statement about police. It's a legal analysis based on our legal background, based on our legal framework. How should this have turned out? And frankly, with the reasonable doubt standard, with the law we have to today, this verdict was shocking for me.
Was it?
Yes, it was shocking. I mean, from a legal standpoint, not from a practical standpoint.
But you predicted it.
I predicted it, but does it still shock me? Yes, because as a lawyer, I feel the consequences in the law, because I'm seeing the ripple effect. I'm like, oh man, this is crazy precedent legally. I understand it because I predicted it, because I was using my realistic, objective brain. When I'm talking to businesses, you know, I talk about the objective facts and there's the legal facts. There's the business considerations, then there's the legal considerations.
Yeah.
And sometimes you take a legal risk because the business reward is bigger.
Right.
Same thing in this case. There were risks that were taken because of the potential rewards. So we're saying, you know, there's a risk to this one officer. The reward is apparently to society, apparently to the preservation of the police state.
Yeah. Yeah. Chad Lemoyne, what up, Chad? He said, you just have to watch pickpockets work to understand what's going on with the media, government agents, and corporations work together to rip us off. Yeah. Have you ever studied pickpockets and how they work? They definitely pose as your friend. Joy Williams, $5, said, did you catch George Floyd's brother and sister's name? Can't make this up. Oh, man, y'all going down the tinfoil hat lane right now. El Diablo Loco Poco said, modern day Salem witch trial, stack up the cordwood. EGP Productions, do you think that police will engage in functional redlining and determining which neighborhoods to police?
Oof.
That's another possibility.
Well, that's why they made the law in Florida too, because they now allow you to sue if the police give a do not respond order, a stand down order. So that's a big part of Florida's act, you know, because, you know, you might have government officials saying, hey, look, this area, it's now, you know, Chaz, it's a chop, you know, sort of situation. And we're just going to treat this like an area it's a no-go zone. You know, I mean, other countries have no-go zones. I never thought that I'd be saying there'd be no-go zones in the US, right? Where they're going to say, look, we're not going to go in here because it's too high of a risk for police, you know, interactions to go down, you know, wrong. So we're just going to have this a no police zone.
Right. All right, we're going to begin to land this plane. Is there anything else that you think we need to discuss in regards to this trial before we talk about traffic stops?
No, I think we've beaten this horse. I think this horse has been beaten the last couple weeks by a bunch of grifters. So I'm not going to grift on this more than I have to grift on this. So look, it's something that you need to actually understand the law on, though, because if you do not understand the law, you don't understand how twisted this is, how twisted this got.
Yeah.
Overall. So I'm glad we had a chance to talk about it.
Predictions in the appeal possibilities or scenarios that could happen?
I don't know them politically. Like I'm more in tune. For example, I'm in Florida. I know the Florida Supreme Court real well. I know if this went down in Florida, that bad boy would be overturned, no problem. Like that would not even be a question about it, just because of how our Supreme Court is structured, who they're appointed by, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But I don't know Minnesota. I don't know their appellate court. I don't know the judges, and I don't know what the temperament is there. Maybe the temperament is we're just going to affirm this thing to keep it quiet, and that could very well happen. So legally, I think there's a strong possibility on the law, but practically, I'm concerned. Let's just put it that way. I am very, very concerned.
But there's definitely grounds for appeal.
100% grounds for appeal. There's this case has very, very clear grounds for appeal.
In regards to traffic stop, I know things are different per state, right?
Yes.
What you can and cannot do.
But there are some federal laws that generally apply and some principles that apply. Okay. A lot of the principles apply to searches and seizures. There's limitations, constitutional right, limited searches and seizures.
Walk me through that. I get pulled over and big white cop is like, "Hey boy, let me see your driver's license." Right? What does he have grounds to do at that point? Does he have grounds to ask me to step out of the vehicle? What does he need for me to do that? Can I deny him that right? How does that work?
And that right there, a lot of those specific questions you're asking me are state to state issues.
That's state to state, yeah.
That's where I'm like, because there's some states where, and let me show you a great example. So let's say the big Uncle Bubba, he walks up, he's going, "Hey boy, let me see your license," and you just slap it up against the windshield. You don't even roll it down.
Yeah,
that is okay in certain states, not okay in other states.
Right.
There are states where legally, under the law, you can put it on the window. You can maybe crack the window so you can speak and hear the officer, and just put the ID against the window or slide through the crack. And you don't even have to roll down the window because he's got no probable cause at that point. You know, that is some states versus others.
Right.
Now, if he suspects another crime, stepping out might be a thing. In certain states, they might be allowed to do a safety check. So do like a frisk for weapons, because once again, one of the overall considerations is sort of balancing your privacy and your rights against searches from officer safety. So there's like an officer safety standpoint. So they're going to say, "Oh, well, this guy could have weapons. This guy, you know, who knows?" So from a safety standpoint, I need to pat him down. My general advice, the practical advice is try to be as polite as possible. Try to comply at first, because honestly, that gets you a long way to start with. If you treat people with respect, generally respect is given back to you. If you don't start it confrontationally, generally that's the best way to start it. You know, you start it confrontationally, they're going to have more reason to believe that, you know, that there's something going on, but they need to escalate, right? They are allowed to detain you for the purpose of that stop. So for whatever reason,
what does detained mean?
Okay. So an important question to ask a police officer when they pull you over or if they're keeping you for a long time is,
am I being detained?
Am I being detained or am I free to go? And get them to say it. Get them to say it on the record. Because even if they say you're detained, stay here. Okay, they've said it. And now you preserved it. And as we all know, they're all wearing body cams now, right? So you've got the footage, you've got it recorded, you know, you have something saying, okay, you say I'm detained? Okay, I'm detained. So then if it's a bad stop, if they're doing some unpermissible purpose, if they're just stopping you because they're a flaming racist, you know, that's like an actual Klan member, then yeah, they're going to have that documented that you wanted to go, they kept you longer, they tried to, you know, fish something up, you've got that on record. And a lot of times they don't have real grounds to keep you longer. But let them run what they're going to run.
Wait, detained means what exactly? Detained
means they are currently keeping you where you are. You have to remain where you are. You are not free to go.
Right.
You are under investigation prior to for an event that could lead to an arrest. Does not mean you're arrested. Arrested means you've been, you have suspected of a crime. They have probable cause that you committed a crime. They're taking you to the station.
Right. Okay.
Before probable cause has been formed.
Okay. Now go beyond that detained. I think I cut you off.
Okay. Yeah. So I was going to say, they do have the right to do certain things, certain investigations for a traffic stop when you're initially detained. For example, plain view analysis. They can see stuff within plain view, right? So they can look in your car. If they see you got a joint in the back seat, well, then you just open up the door for them to investigate the car, right? You got a bowl in the back seat, they're going to investigate, right?
Yeah.
You got a gun in the back seat that's in plain view, they can investigate, right? So you do that, that's one thing. Another thing is during that time, they can typically call a drug dog. Now, they can't keep you there for 3 hours to wait for the dog, but if Fido gets there in 10 minutes, 5 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, that's permissible. And they can do a cursory check. They can walk the dog around your car. That's permissible, right? But if it's something that they're making you wait there for an hour, 2 hours, that's not permissible. Now, does that mean that you can speed away because it's not permissible? No. Stay there, let them do it, let it get thrown out in court because it will be. If they're keeping you there for an hour to get your drug dog out, that's going to be probably thrown out. It's not going to fly. So just understand that. And also another thing is don't consent to a search of your car. That's a big thing. I say a lot of people, they just consent to it because they think they're going to get out of it. But you'd be surprised what they can find in your car. They just need to find one thing.
Yeah, they're going to find that joint from 10 years ago.
They're going to find a residue. They're going to find the resin,
Right. Or what they think is resin.
Exactly. That pill that's unmarked, that unmarked pill. Yeah.
Yeah, that Motrin that you dropped underneath your seat last week.
Oh, God, the Viagra you needed, all that's just laying out there.
Yeah. So probable cause. What do they need for probable cause? I know you talked about like seeing stuff and all of that. Is there anything else?
It's just think about it as a reasonable belief, right? So a reasonable belief. So, they have a reasonable belief that a crime was committed. They can take you away. That's the easiest way to think about it. It can't be an unreasonable belief. It can't be something that's like very, very, conspiracy theory. You're going full Alex. You can't go full Alex on this. You gotta keep this tight.
Right.
And their logic has to be very, very sound, very, very demonstrable. You got to say, okay, this guy has a joint. Therefore, it is reasonable to believe he has paraphernalia, he's in possession, so we're going to take him down to the station. Or this guy's got an open beer bottle. It looks like he's, had that beer. He could be drunk. Therefore, we got to take him down to the station to blow. That's a really great example.
Okay.
Open liquor bottle would be clear probable cause of a DUI if you're in a car.
Sure. When we want to find out our rights in our state, where are we looking and what are we looking for?
Well, obviously every state has a constitution, right? So Our state has a constitution, and remember, you have the U.S. Constitution, but the state can give you rights above the U.S. Constitution.
Based upon the 10th Amendment, right?
Yes, they can give you additional protections and rights. So understand that your state may give you higher levels of rights. Even there's some states that give higher levels of privacy rights than we have nationally. That's why a lot of states are taking action on this, and that's why the federal government may take action on this, because right now a lot of our privacy, our data is just floating out there, right? But states are taking actions to raise that bar. In the same way, they can make certain types of stops, certain things impermissible. So I would encourage you to start there, start with the Constitution. And from there, I would look at any sort of advocacy group or, for example, the criminal bar has good information on it in my state, Florida. So if I went to the criminal defense bar for Miami-Dade County, where I am right now, they would have great information about our rights within the state, locally. Sometimes locally, there'll be extra protections. For example, there might be super special protections for, any member of LGBTQ, that might be extra special protections locally, right?
Yeah.
So You know, there's stuff like that that's local. So if you want to look at that, look at a local association. They'll probably have that information for you.
Local association and
so look at lawyers. Yeah, and look at lawyers, look at legal associations, because typically the legal groups are going to have good information because they're trying to make it accessible. They're trying to make it easy to read. They're trying to get it out there to people. So look at your local legal associations, criminal defense, and try to get your rights from them. Beyond that, state constitution. And honestly, guys, I'll tell you one thing. I've had to read these constitutions in many states. They're not horribly long. They are actually worth a read. Just the Constitution. I'm not talking about all the statutes, not talking about everything else, just your state constitution. Know what your state constitutional rights are. Just like you should know your U.S. constitutional rights, you should know your state constitutional rights.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Halawe S, does Andrew agree that police should do more responding like firemen do, or to write reports after incidents for insurance, criminal purposes only? I don't think that's what he was saying.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, look, what I was just saying is, and I don't have an answer for it. Frankly, I haven't thought deeply on this yet. I would need to go, meditate on this very, very deeply on how to transform policing in America. That's a deep question, but I think that there's ways that we could limit. Would draw back. Maybe we limit traffic stops. Maybe we say, you know what? This is one thing. For example, you talk about the robots, right, Hotep? Do we need humans to tell us we're speeding anymore? In Germany for years, they've been using cameras and lights. I think they call them blitzers in German, and they just tag you. You're speeding, flag you, send you the ticket. I mean, we've already got red light cams. Do you really need a cop to tell you you're speeding?
Yeah. And I think a good start would be to remove the quotas.
And it's a huge issue. I mean, the quotas are what keeps some small towns and cities alive. Right. I mean, that's the revenue source for these small towns. They just pop you. They're trying to get you with as much as they can get you. Yeah.
I think my first real, I wouldn't say first, but brush with legal racism. There's a small town and it's predominantly white town. But when you go to court, traffic court specifically, everybody in there is black and Hispanic. And it's just like, you're like, how is this predominantly white neighborhood got all these? Does it mean that only black and Hispanic people are the only ones committing crimes? So not only are they financing this stuff, they're actually financing this stuff off of, non-whites, which is really funny to me. And it was funny because I used to get in a lot of trouble in traffic court when I was younger. I had my license suspended and all types of points out the ass. But no matter how white the town was that I went to, I always saw a line of black people out the door. And I'm like, yo, this is a white ass town. What is y'all doing down here? But
it's about, I will tell you one thing though, it's about political control too. Because let's look at that. I guarantee you that town council is all white. I guarantee you that. And you know what? You care less about people who aren't in the positions of power and aren't controlling the government. And I'll even tell you, even here in Miami, when I go to different areas, I grew up in a specific area of Miami. Miami actually has a lot of different cities. The city of Miami is actually kind of small. There's a lot of neighboring cities that make up the Miami metropolitan area. So I drive across the bridge to a little area called Key Biscayne, separate town. It's over a bridge. As soon as I hit that bridge, speeding ticket. But when I'm in the city of Miami, where my address was, I never got a speeding ticket because they look at my license and they see Miami. Yeah. But Key Biscayne, they don't give a hoot because I'm not electing them. I have no vote. I have no power over them. So a big part of this is that they feel like they're not accountable to you, so they can do whatever they want. That's the whole thing with out-of-state tags. When I hit that Georgia line, that Florida Georgia line, they see that tag, they just start grinning and the lights go on. Yep. 5 miles an hour over, lights are on because they know they're not accountable to you. They're not, and you're not going to follow up with that. They're going to tag you.
Yep. So true. And this, these incidents are having me in good old blue New Jersey. Overkill TBP said, what annoys me is what happened to Tony Tempa never got covered. Why the silence for a white guy dying? Why make a big deal over a criminal? That's what I was saying earlier, man. Canon Hotep, salute, good convo. Everyone needs to hear it. Shout out to Canon Hotep. Make sure I subscribe to his channel. Joy Williams, $5. Thank you. Abe Schmidt, Chauvin had to take one for the country. Andrew, thank you for coming on the show. Make sure y'all follow Andrew. Legal Mindset. What else you got coming out on the channel soon?
Man, we've got a lot of huge topics. Like I said, court packing, Florida's bill. We got a lot of gun stuff because, guys, 2A is going to be massive. And I've got a lot of 2A stuff coming out soon because we really got to be concerned about these attacks on all fronts against the 2A. So definitely look out for that stuff because that's coming down the pipe very, very soon.
Awesome. Thank you, y'all. This has been another sharp conversation. Hit the subscribe button. I'm going to upload this to Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple soon. So make sure y'all go subscribe to those and leave a positive review. Thank you for listening. I love y'all. Hotep. Andrew, stick around. I want to talk to you real fast.
Sounds good. Soon.
Awesome. Thank you, y'all. This has been another sharp conversation. Hit the subscribe button. I'm going to upload this to Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple soon. So make sure y'all go subscribe to those and leave a positive review. Thank you for listening. I love y'all. Hotep. Andrew, stick around. I want to talk to you.